We may well reflect that in these days of salvation, the day of worship is no longer the Sabbath day, as it was in times of old, but is now become the Lord's Day, Kyriaki, the first day of the week. But we still have the same idea in our minds, that Sunday is a day to come and worship, a day to come and look right, a day to come and be holy and righteous people. And these things are true. And yet, as we stand in the church, as we prepare to approach the holy mysteries that the Lord offers to us, we are tempted to look to the right and to the left, to consider whether those who are here with us are doing things as they ought to do them. And the Lord calls us in the gospel today to set these things aside, because the simple reality is we come to the church to be healed. We come to encounter the Lord and to receive new strength, new life from Him, not to judge, not to criticize, not to weigh whether our brothers or sisters are doing the things that they ought to do in the church. Those matters, leave them to God. Let us bring ourselves to the Lord, offer ourselves to Him, and seek from Him the grace and the mercy and the healing and the strength that He gives. In that mind and heart, let us stand and continue the liturgy. Amen. And as the brother bishops prepared to do so, they had a dream. And the Panagia, the Theotokos, appeared to them and said, "Do not remove him from his episcopate, because what he has done is done out of love, out of zeal for the Lord. Not that it was right, mind you. We don't say that it was right, but we say that it was done in the right spirit." Now, these are weighty matters in these days. The question of violence done out of sincere belief is a present problem for all of us. And very often, as we resolve to ourselves that we would never do violence for Christ, we may go too far. We may say that maybe we're not sure that it's true enough, that it's real enough, that Christ is present enough to be worth doing violence for. Yes, this is often the road that we take as human beings to a commitment of peace, because we tell ourselves it's not worth hurting someone else for it. This is the wrong reason. The reason that we are called to peace and we are called not to do violence is not because the faith is not true enough, is not worthy of our sincere devotion. Very much the opposite. It is a faith, it is a truth, it is a reality that is worth accepting violence upon ourselves rather than betray it. It is so true that we put up our swords, that we set aside self-defense, and we give ourselves to the Lord. Now, St. Nicholas knew this. He had given himself in every way to Christ. And I think it is because of this, as much as anything else, that the violence that he did to the heretic was forgiven. But for us, as we look at St. Nicholas, we must find a middle way. We must imitate absolutely his zeal, his faith, his devotion to God in all things. But in this day and age, we must abandon, we must forswear the impression that the Lord requires us to do violence on his behalf. There is never a justification from the church to do evil to another. Even if they are an evil person, Christ does not excuse us. He does not make us the judge or the one who executes the penalty. He calls us to love. He calls us to pray. He calls us to follow him. Even as he went to the cross, so too we are called. Because the faith is not only worth fighting for, it is worth dying for. It is worth suffering for. Because Christ walks with us through the suffering, through the brokenness of this world, and he leads us into the new creation, where all things are made new, where violence and anger and error have all passed away. This is our hope. This is our citizenship. And as the Lord said, this is why we set aside the sword, even when others bring the sword against us for reasons of religion. Because the Lord said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. And my kingdom, he says, is not of this world. If it were of this world, then would my servants fight. But my kingdom is not of this world. Now, I want to be clear. I am not preaching pacifism. The question of whether violence can be done and it is okay is another question entirely. But we are never permitted to do violence with the excuse that we are defending the faith with it. Ourselves, fine. The Lord is merciful. But not the church, not the faith, not Christ. Because the Lord has given us a new kingdom, and it is not of this world. As we look at the example of St. Nicholas, therefore, and we have the wisdom to discern the error and the remedy. And we have the strength to imitate his zeal, his love, his absolute devotion, his dedication to God. And may we have the courage and the faith to set aside the fist, the sword, the gun in defense of the Lord, and instead offer ourselves entirely to God. Amen.